Hey horror lovers and everyone in between, welcome back to Screaming for Horror. This is Rain. How are ya? I can't imagine truck driving being an easy job. The long hours on the road, days, and sometimes weeks away from home and your loved ones, and only the road of solitude ahead. At the same time, you get to see amazing views and interact with other people and places, even if it is in the form of a ghostly encounter. The truckers in our next list have experienced picking up a hair-raising story. But before we start, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more upcoming creepy and scary content. These are unnerving trucker accounts. Number 1. The Hanging Man. I was driving home one night as I had not seen my family for about 2 weeks. Filled with excitement, I decided to take a shortcut through a desolated area that I didn't know too well. I had heard stories through the scanner about this road, mostly ghostly tales. And I do believe in ghosts, but my eagerness to surprise my wife and kids got the best of me. It was about 3:40 a.m. or so in the morning, and I had been on that particular road for about an hour already, and nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Suddenly, I get to an area packed with old, creepy trees and tons of shrubbery. As usual, my radio is on, and out of nowhere, this horrible static starts to crackle through the speakers. I started to feel chilly and uncomfortable, when wouldn't you know it, I saw a man hanging from a tree on the side of the road. There he was. His body was even swinging from side to side. I stepped on the brake as fast and carefully as I could, but I kept looking through the rearview mirror, and he was still there. I grabbed my coat, my gun, and my flashlight, and I had my phone in my pocket, and I started to dial 911, but there was no signal. I made my way through the shrubs, and when I reached the tree, he was gone. I moved the flashlight around, thinking maybe he got free, and nothing. I went back to my truck, looked back, and there he was again, hanging like I had seen him before. After this, let's just say I didn't like taking any more shortcuts. Number 2. Lizard-like creature. My friend and I stopped at some shady truck stop off of Interstate 37, going towards Corpus Christi, Texas. He fell asleep, and I'm not gonna lie, I was about to pass out too. I finally decided to pull over, and I fell asleep, when a little while later, we heard a loud bang on the side of the cab that startled us. We woke up immediately, only to find this big, lizard-like creature with red glowing eyes and sharp-looking teeth looking back at us. No, it wasn't the creature from the Jeepers Creepers movies either, and you don't have to believe me, but we both know what we saw that night. It stood there, I don't know how many minutes just looking at us. Nothing else. After that, it flew over the cab and took off in the dark of the night. Number 3. Object in the sky. I'm not one to believing anything like this, but I had to share. During the summer of 2005 or 2006, around 2 a.m., driving back home from Rushville, Illinois, about northeast of the town, there's a rural area filled with cornfields and woods. My father was driving and I was in the passenger seat when my dad suddenly taps my shoulder and points out the window, and he tells me, "Look." About 300 yards out or so, there's a large object flying a few hundred feet away from the ground, smoothly and constantly passing us. It looked like it had either 1 or 2 levels, rows of lights that went along the sides, and bright large rectangle windows with rounded corners spewing out white light. It made no sound, and it flew straight. It did not rotate, and it had no blinking or no flashes of any kind, indicating that it could be some sort of small plane or any traditional aircraft. It kept flying straight forward and disappeared into the distance. I turned to my dad, and we both looked at each other and said, "That was interesting," and we kept on driving home with no further comment. Number 4. The Shapeshifter. Many years ago, I was on a shift called Meet and Turn. This is where the driver that is domiciled out of the city will drive a load halfway to its destination, while the other driver meets him halfway where it needs to be delivered. I had been doing runs like these for several months, and I found out that I had to meet on point an hour before the other driver arrived. It was a dark and empty lot around 3 a.m., so since there was still some time to kill, I decided to close my eyes and take a short nap. About 10 minutes into my nap, I was awakened by a barking dog. I tried to ignore it, but the bark carried on for several minutes and it grew louder and closer. At this point, it became clear that he's either trying to alert me of something or he's just being a pain in the butt. So I sat up and looked out my window, and what I saw left me motionless. Standing there, inches on the other side of the glass, was a man around 35 years of age. He was a large fellow, and he was barking at me. His eyes were crazy, and he was even frothing a little from his mouth. The sheer creepiness struck me, and gently, without making any sudden movements, I reached down and started my truck and slowly started pulling away. As I was doing so, he was chasing after me, much like you would expect an angry dog, and still barking as I kept pulling away. Needless to say, I don't take naps anymore. Number 5. Sobbing. I used to drive between San Francisco and Cheyenne, Wyoming a lot of the times. It's about 16 to 20 hours of driving depending on the weather. My second time driving that route, I was driving at night when suddenly my truck starts to make this odd grinding noise, sounding like if I had run over something and it got stuck. It's about 2 a.m. and I pull up to a very well-lit rest stop and I wake my buddy up, who had been sleeping the whole time. As we both make our way out of the vehicle, I started to explain to him the situation about the grinding noise, when we started to hear what it sounded like a kid crying. There's not a vehicle in sight besides ours. At the same time, we had heard stories about child trafficking and kidnapping nearby, so we decided to check it out. We grabbed our flashlights and made our way towards the bathrooms, since that's where the noise was coming from. As we get closer, we realized it was coming from the woman's bathroom. It was a low, dull sobbing, and we were prepared for the worst. We walked in expecting to see someone brutally beaten or worse, but we see nothing. We only hear the sound. It's still there, but there's nobody there. It's empty. We turned the lights on, and still nothing. We checked each stall just to make sure. We even looked exactly where the noise was coming from, and again, nothing. Is it a hidden camera? A speaker? What the hell? My buddy sees a small window and opens it up, and the noise decreases. We stood there for a few seconds, and the window slams shut on its own, and the crying begins again. We were out of the bathroom in seconds. As we ran towards the truck, you could still hear the crying. Of course, the grinding noise is still there, so this time, I pull up to another rest stop some miles away from where we were. I checked underneath, and we saw some sort of red and silver metal stuck right in there, and we couldn't take it out. A few days later, I took it to a mechanic buddy of mine, and he told me that the piece of scrap metal that was stuck was part of a kid's bicycle. I don't know if this is somehow related to our experience, but it was one of those moments for me that I will never forget. Well, Screamers, we've reached the end of our video. If you have a ghostly experience, a close encounter, or want to share any photos or videos of strange phenomena, feel free to send us an email to screamingforhorror@gmail.com, and your story could be featured in one of our future videos. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Subscribe and follow us on our Facebook page for more. And remember, until next time, sweet screams.